Hey, welcome to Books, Builds, and More. I'm Travis, and today I have another book tag. This is the Filmtastic February tag, and I was tagged by Michael at Michael's Backlog. Please go check out his channel. It's linked below, and I think you're going to really enjoy him. I really love his channel. He has great commentary, reads a lot of interesting books. He's just an overall great guy. I think you should go check out his channel. And he was tagged by a gentleman named Duncan from a channel called Back Away from the Donkey. And that is a great channel as well. Please go check that out. And Duncan, I believe, is one of the hosts of this event. Filmtastic February is actually a communal reading event going on right now, where the criteria is to read books based around film or watch films. But basically, it's to read, mostly, books about films, fiction, or nonfiction. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Duncan is also the originator of this tag, as well as one of the hosts of the reading event. So please click on Duncan's link below as well for more information if you're interested in doing the reading event, which unfortunately I probably won't, even though it sounds like a great reading event, but I just have a couple of other major ones plus my book club going on at this time, so I don't want to take too much on. But for anyone interested, again, please go check out Duncan's channel for more information on the reading event. There are 10 prompts to this tag, the 10th one being to tag others, so let's get started. Prompt number 1, your first memory of seeing a film at the Pictures or Cinema. Star Wars, back in 1977. My parents took me to watch that. I don't remember, of course, the entire experience at 5 years old, but I do remember seeing, I do remember pretty much what the experience was back then, but I do remember that was the very first film that I remember seeing in the actual theater. You know, I feel like, I guess they thought at 5 years old I would be old enough to pretty much remember a majority of it, and I do. Prompt number 2, a book about film. It can be behind the scenes, an autobiography or biography, or a fiction book that includes film as a main subject. Well, being as that I've never read any kind of like made for or behind the scenes or any kind of autobiography or biography, I'm going to have to stick with the fiction book that includes film as a main theme, and I'm going to go with Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay. I read this just recently, this past October for spooky reading season, and a majority of this book revolves around these teens that are kind of making this indie film. And a lot of the writing in this book is in movie script form. So it's basically like reading a film inside of the story. And FYI, didn't really care for that a whole lot. Prompt number 3, a novelization or tie-in book. I've read quite a few novelizations, especially in my youth. I'm going to go with the first one that sticks out, and I'm going to have to say Gremlins, based on the movie. Yes, I did watch the movie first, of course, but I did want to read the book. I did that. Even with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, I did the same thing. I read the book after I watched the movie. But Gremlins just kind of stuck out in my mind after I read this question, and I'm just going to go with that one. Prompt number 4, a film about writers or writing. Again, first thing that pops into mind is Misery by Stephen King. Like just about every other kind of Stephen King story, I've always watched the movie before the book. I have not read the book, but I have seen the movie quite a few times actually, and it is about this author who gets in a car accident, and he ends up ultimately being kidnapped and held hostage and pretty brutalized by this self-proclaimed psycho nurse who, you know, #1 fan of his, Annie Wilkes. So yeah, I'm gonna have to say that that's the film that sticks out to me, something about writers or writing, you know, because she kind of forces him to write or rewrite her favorite character from his famous novels for her, you know, write another novel, you know. Prompt number 5, a film that brings back fond memories. I'm going to have to go with It's a Wonderful Life from 1946, you know, the old James Stewart, very popular film. It's always been kind of a family tradition to watch it every year around Christmas time. Of course, I think that's the kind of film that you could watch any time of the year, really. But I still keep the tradition alive today. I usually just watch it by myself now, but that's probably the one that brings back the best memories. Prompt number 6, a film that made you want to read the book. Okay, this one, due to its iconicism in popular culture, is going to seem probably obvious and cliche, but I have to go with Jaws. Of course, I've watched the movie before I read the book, but I didn't really care about wanting to read the book at first. But then I got to hearing all these reviews about it, about how, mostly negative, about how the characters were so unlikable, how there are these kind of other subplots that are in it, and I wanted to see what it was about. Basically, I just wanted to see what the hype was that made the movie as great and popular as it is today. And so that's my reasoning for that. Prompt number 7, a book that made you want to watch the film. I guess sticking with Spielberg here, I'm going to go with Jurassic Park. Of course, I didn't have this edition back then, but I did read Jurassic Park when it first came out in 1990. And after I read it and loved it, I thought, oh man, this would be such a great film. Lo and behold, 3 years later, guess what? Boom. They made the film, which is now a huge franchise, a growing franchise. So, yeah, that was that. Prompt number 8, films based on a book or story that bear no resemblance to the source. Okay, this one was by far the most difficult and challenging question of this entire tag for me, because I could not think of anything except, funnily enough, just recently I read and reviewed Lewis Carroll's original tale of Alice in Wonderland and its sequel, Through the Looking Glass. And it reminded me, when I said in that review that the only adaptation I've ever seen of this story before I read the book, is the only thing I really knew about it was watching the original 1951 Disney animated film of it, which actually utilizes elements from both of those stories into that one film. So I feel like, but it still resembles the stories. You know, they're just out of place and they're just kind of mingled in, but it still resembled the story. So I don't think that's a really good answer for that. However, the more I thought about that, the more other classic Disney films that are out there that I feel like could fit, that could be an acceptable answer here. Most notably Pinocchio, because a lot of these original Disney movies that are based on these, you know, original tales are made into these cutesy little animated tales, but they're based on, their origins come from very tragic, very dark, and often violent, you know, origins. And like Pinocchio, I was going to say Pinocchio is a very brutal original story, and Pinocchio is just an incredibly dislikable character in the original tale, and he suffers like a whole bunch of abuse, and he's just a brat, you know, and it just ultimately ends tragically. And you know, there's a lot of violence in that. And like The Little Mermaid, take The Little Mermaid for instance, that was a very tragic story. It ended just so, it was so depressing. And also in the original tale, you're not going to find anything like a Jamaican accented speaking crab that, you know, occasionally bursts into calypso flavored musical numbers, you know. So yeah, I don't know, but still these movies still kind of resemble the original stories though. So I can't say that there's no resemblance. At best you can say they're just altered, because I'm so very cinematically undercultured anyway. That's the absolute best answer I've got for that prompt. Prompt number 9, recommend 5 films. Okay, because a lot of my answers have included very popular films and or books in this tag so far. I'm going to stray off the path a little bit. And now a couple of these recommendations are quite popular, but I want this answer to contain as many just personal recommendations as I can possibly give. Not saying that recommending something very popular wouldn't be personal. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just wanting to stray off of the popularity a little bit and give recommendations that I personally feel are a bit underrated and deserve a little bit more attention. And my first one is actually quite popular, and that is Casablanca from 1942. You know, Humphrey Bogart, Ingrid Bergman. Just a great classic film. Just absolutely superb classic film. I loved it. I also want to recommend Vertigo, a Hitchcock film that stars James Stewart again, one of my favorite actors, by the way, and Kim Novak from the 1958 version of the film. I think that's the only version of the film. It seems to me like there might have been like a remake or something along. I could be wrong about that. Again, like I said, cinematically undercultured. I don't really know films all that well. The third one I want to recommend is State Fair, a Rodgers and Hammerstein adaptation. It is a musical, therefore. This is a 1945 version starring Dick Haymes and Vivian Blaine, two of my favorite 40s vocalists. They got some great musical numbers in this film, and it's just a really good story. I think that is definitely worth a recommendation. I also want to this is one of my most recent watches. At number 4, my fourth recommendation is the 1935 adaptation of Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, with Robert Coleman in the role of Sidney Carton. And it's just a phenomenal film. It's just a phenomenal film. It made me appreciate the story. I didn't care that much for the book when I read it way back in high school. I struggled with Dickens' writing. I don't want to go off on a tangent here because I could talk about this all day long. But this film was produced by David O. Selznick, who also produced Gone with the Wind. So you can see his style of production in Tale of Two Cities, and that helped make it a really great film as well. And my fifth recommendation is one that is fairly popular, mostly due to the fact that it's a Mel Gibson film, but I thought it was a very unique film, and I feel like it's a little bit underrated, and that is The Man Without a Face. And this came out in 1993, and it's the story about this man who's kind of disfigured, like severely disfigured and scarred from a past accident, and he kind of befriends this young boy who's trying to get into this military academy, and he needs help with tutoring and studying, and they kind of form this kind of mentorship, and also just a really unlikely but unique friendship. And it's just a really unique film, and I really think it's a good recommendation. And prompt number 10 is to tag others. I'm going to tag Albert at Albert the Conjugator. I'm going to tag Mary and Joe at BookBuds, Lauren and Ben at Youngs and the Restless, Jess at JessBookGirl TV. I want to tag Brian at the Crusty Codex, and reluctantly, I want to tag Scott at some other character. I'm not sure if he'll do the tag because I don't know if he's that much into cinema and film. You might have to click on his channel and go exploring a little bit to judge for yourself, but I'm going to tag him. Of course, if you're watching this and you haven't been tagged, please feel free to do so, because that's the beauty of tags, is anyone can join and anyone can do them, whether you're tagged or not. Please consider yourself free. These are not like trademarked or anything. So if you've stuck with me this far, thank you so much for watching. This was a pretty fun tag to do, even though I got stumped on that one question pretty badly. But regardless, that's just part of the challenge and part of the fun of it. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon with another video.